Okay. Let y'all know. I'm proud of you for being here. We're about a third down. Usually it's a half down on Fridays. Everyone's exhausted. And Tim and I took a mental health / needed to mow the lawn before the neighbors kick us out of the neighborhood yesterday. So anyway, and now that since we bought the house next door, he's got 2 lawns to mow. But it's better than last time we did this because it was across town.
Yeah. I can just mow straight into the next
Just
yard.
and look how even that is. How nice!
At least I know my neighbor's going to mow when I do, because it's me.
Yeah. So, okay. Today, I'm sorry, I don't have a cover sheet. I was looking for some little excerpts. That's what I've been trying to do. Only this time I just gave you, because we have so many that I'm going to touch on. Actually, just 5, I think, that will actually read some of the beginning intro paragraphs. But there are more authors there than that. 1920s is, oh, wow. I think I got it down to 9. And, I mean, it's just ripe with literature. And very important literature, by the way, that many of you probably read, growing up or in high school if it was on your reading list. This time, we have a mixture of American authors, British authors, and a German author. And so, kind of a blending of where things have gone and how much more cosmopolitan people are thinking, and their confusion, by the way, after, they're kind of like a duck hit on the head, can't get their bearings yet. So it causes all this self-questioning. One of the big deals in the 1920s for this era of disillusionment is the need, and this will come in some of the things, again, we're back to escapism, but also the need for a hero. And so this is where we're getting more and more into like Dashiell Hammett and beginning of his writings. Somebody that has a macho, very stereotypical character. And yet, had a novel this spring, top novel. It's a senior class. So we read Maltese Falcon. How many of you have seen the movie? How many times The Maltese Falcon? And I'm not particularly a Humphrey Bogart fan. Never have been, I don't know why. Just, he's not my thing. So, but I love reading the book. And my female students just were appalled. This is so sexist. Well, yeah, that's part of the fun. Lighten up a little bit. So, he is very sexist. And his females are very stereotypical. But once again, that's part, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek humor. That's part of the escapism. Go to another world where things are very clear-cut and defined. Men have these roles. Women have these roles. It's also the introduction, I'll get back to F. Scott here in a minute, the introduction of I'd say Noor, sorry, I can never say it, of the female villain. She's bad, really bad. With a smile on her face, but she's bad. Yeah. Oh yeah, the face, the body, So, and she always says the right things. But it's like with a lot of literature, what's not said on the printed page is as important as what is printed on the page. That's really important, reading between the lines. So we've got the introduction of that, which is a big deal. Now, how about if I get back to our first page? So I get started on that. Sorry, I love it. F. Scott Fitzgerald, I'll try to go through this relatively quickly on the bios, but try to hang with me. He rose to prominence, second line, as a chronicler of the Jazz Age. He joined the U.S. Army. His third novel, Great Gatsby, I'm just touchstoning, was 1925, and I did put these somewhat this time in chronological order. It was highly regarded. He struggled with alcoholism, and of course his wife, if you know very much about him, struggled with mental illness their entire marriage. Skip on down the second paragraph. And it says here, he's born in Minnesota. Fitzgerald had the good fortune and the misfortune to be a writer who summed up an era. A couple lines down, he grew up acutely conscious of wealth and privilege and of his family's exclusion from the social elite. So most of his novels have to do with social strata. And he makes these observations about society. Keep going, close friends with Edmund Wilson, blah, 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 blah. Next page, in that first big paragraph, he goes to Princeton, but he leaves, he doesn't graduate. And then a couple lines down, the 20s were beginning to roar, bathtub gin and flaming youth were on everyone's lips, and the handsome, witty Fitzgerald seemed to be the ideal spokesman for the decade. And go on down the last paragraph there, or last sentence. The Great Gatsby, the story of a gangster's pursuit of an unattainable rich girl, was close to a masterpiece. Scott does become an alcoholic, and Zelda, and I thought this was an interesting observation by the person, who's compiling this. Jealous of his fame, parenthetical, or in some versions, thwarted by it, because she's a very talented person in her own right, collapsed into madness. So then going down to the Great Depression, the kind of writing he did, people were no longer interested in the Depression as people are starving and homeless and crops have failed and can't plant any crops and many people are migrants. They're no longer interested in the party life. So he kind of falls, from popularity there for quite a while. He does try, bottom of that paragraph, he does try to continue to make a living as a screenwriter in Hollywood. And he has some minimal success there. He does die of a heart attack. And then it's interesting, obituaries generally dismissed him. That shows pinnacle and kind of how he's fallen out of the limelight. Go on down, mid-paragraph of the last paragraph. Few historians have matched the closing lines of The Great Gatsby when the narrator reflects on how the land must have struck Dutch sailors' eyes 300 years earlier. For a transitory enchanted moment, man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent, compelled into an aesthetic contemplation he neither understood nor desired, face to face for the last time in history with something commiserate to his capacity to wonder. The divine. Let's I'm going to share with you, and this is, by the way, folks, just to remind everybody, I've given you the first page. If you are fine with reading online, just go in. All of these I've taken, you can go to this web address, and it has the entirety, most of them, the entirety of the novel. If you don't find the entirety, because some of them I typed in chapter 1, that's all it gave me. If you just look there on your scrolling and type in the title of the book, then it will give you a PDF full text. Just look for PDFs, okay, full text, and you get the whole novel. All right. In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. He didn't say any more, but we've always been unusually communicative in a reserved way, and I understood that he meant a great deal more than that. In consequence, I am inclined to reserve all judgments a habit that has opened up many curious natures to me and also made me the victim of not a few veteran bores. The abnormal mind is quick to detect and attach itself to this quality when it appears in a normal person. And so it came about that in college I was unjustly accused of being a politician because I was privy to the secret griefs of wild, unknown men. Most of the confidences were unsought. Frequently, I have feigned sleep, preoccupation, or a hostile levity when I realized by some unmistakable sign that an intimate revelation was quivering on the horizon. So here we are. We've got the introduction of something that's very interesting in the 20s. We have the introduction of the unreliable narrator. And we will see this, especially as we go into Hammett's, Dashiell Hammett's. The person that's narrating the story, Agatha Christie does this as well. You can't trust them all the time. So, you know, they're not God. They have a viewpoint. They have ulterior motives. So we've got the same thing going on here in this particular story. He wants to be an observer. He wants to be the fly on the wall. He wants to kind of stay in the corner. But yet, he still wants to be very much a part of the action of the important people. But he doesn't want to put himself in any kind of danger or disreputable actions, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So there we go with that. How many have read Great Gatsby? Several of you? Oh, my husband loved Great Gatsby. Let's hear it.
I used to teach Great Gatsby when I taught English, high school English back in the day.
In the day.
I taught Great Gatsby. Somebody asked earlier, by the way, the F in his name is actually Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald. He's a second cousin, 3 times removed from Scott Key on his father's side. No, I taught this back in the 80s when students still kind of read, so, but they always seem to enjoy it. They always seem to appreciate the novel. It's
Seniors, juniors?
Juniors and seniors, I'd say mostly, yeah. Again, late
Well, you
80s,
taught
early
gifted
90s.
in the school system. So
Yeah, this class wasn't gifted, but usually this was a popular novel with them.
which Shannon was a part of, but anyway.
Yeah, Shannon was in that class one year, yeah, probably 87, 87.
Y'all know the story behind Fitz? Anybody with the prefix of Fitz before their name, do you know that story? Okay, well, here we go. Generally speaking, of course, now it's been, acclimated into the language, so it's not a big deal. But its origins were Fitz was the bastard son of Gerald.
Oh,
Man, you were illegitimate.
Illegitimate. Isn't that interesting?
yes.
So, John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So, isn't that interesting how words and connotations and social standing changes our, consideration of what that means, Anyway.
But the novel's right. You're talking about unreliable narrator. This is a novel that is not third person narration. It's first person.
Right.
Nick is a character
Right.
in the story.
And we start having more and more of that.
Yeah, so he has to tell the entire story from his perspective. Well, there's all kinds of things he tells about that you're left with. Now, wait a minute, Nick, how do you even know that?
Right,
I mean, were
right.
you there? And of course, he will claim talking to this person or whatever. So
And he
Yeah.
always does something of a removal, a step back.
yeah.
And so whenever somebody does that in their narration, that's a red flag for them being unreliable. Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And I can't
Say that again now.
Whenever somebody is talking in first person in their writing, okay? I. And, because it's a singular point of view,
Yeah.
so that's a red flag for they're somewhat unreliable. They're not God. They're not going to tell you everything. They're going to select what they want to tell you.
Oh,
Okay.
interesting.
So It's like when we share information with one another, whether we realize it or not, and it's not because we're trying to be deceptive, although we could be trying to be deceptive. Anyway, we select pieces of information we share. So no one gets the whole picture, okay? McNeese?
Well, and the thing about that novel is it's as much, of course, a lot of F. Scott Fitzgerald's novels are semi-biographical. They're scenes from his life, and certainly Great Gatsby is similar in that the narrator is telling you about the Great Gatsby, this gangster prohibition character, but he'll go into his past, and then you're starting to get Fitzgerald's own story, where Gatsby is a young man stationed at a fort in Montgomery, Alabama. Well, so was F. Scott Fitzgerald, and he meets this young socialite. Well, so did F. Scott Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald marries his. I mean, that's Zelda, but Gatsby
Well,
does
after
not.
she's already been married.
Exactly. Yeah. So in Gatsby, he doesn't connect. He doesn't marry this woman. They can't. They go separate ways. But the novel's basically about him reconnecting with her years later, when he finds out that she lives across the way on Long Island.
Yeah. And it's about social mobility, and then also still feeling on the outside. Always feeling not quite good enough. So that's a large part of the novel. Okay, let's go to Virginia Woolf.
Can I read one thing? I hate to keep interrupting you. Yeah, I promise not to interrupt you the
Feel
rest of the
free.
time. No, I'm not going to do that.
You had your time.
Yeah, just to bridge World War I
Yeah.
and F. Scott Fitzgerald, I just want to read you just a couple of lines from Tender is the Night, one of his novels. He didn't publish this until the 30s. But there's a scene in Tender is the Night in which you have a couple of characters. Dick Diver's one of the main characters. But they are actually touring the Somme battlefield. This is years and years later. And what Dick Diver says about this battlefield that they're now tromping around on as civilians, he says this. He says, see that little stream? As he looks across the way, see that little stream? We could walk to it in 2 minutes. It took the British a whole month to walk to it. A whole empire walking very slowly, dying in front and pushing forward behind, and another empire walked very slowly backward, a few inches a day, leaving the dead like a million bloody rugs. And then he says, no Europeans will ever do that again in this generation. And he's wrong. Because they will. Even these guys here in 34, in context of this novel published in 34, they still don't see it. They still don't see it coming. We'll never do this again. Well, yeah, you will. It's going to be worse.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. And by the way, just so you'll know, I did not include James Joyce in this. It was just too much.
Yeah.
And partly because there's some excerpts from James Joyce I don't want to read. So there you go. I edited it. So let's go to Virginia Woolf, who has, obviously female writer, but who has the stream of consciousness style that James Joyce and Ulysses really pioneers. Okay, all stream of consciousness, Ulysses, whatever it is, 900 pages of a man and the life and the, I can say it, a day in the life of a man, thoughts. And so Virginia Woolf takes it one step further. By the way, British. Anyway, so if you look down here, she's born into a rather prominent family. Intellectuals. Her father's a writer and philosopher. Her mother's a British aristocrat. And she, as well as 2 brothers, take a house near the British Museum as adults. They start developing close friendships with other intellectuals and writers. I'm skipping on down. I guess Virginia Woolf, including Woolf herself, many of this group were bisexual or homosexual. Just get it out of the way. Virginia married writer and social reformer Minard Wolf in 1912. They established the Hogarth Press, which is kind of an important thing. Going down the last paragraph, Woolf published her groundbreaking novel, Mrs. Dalloway. It's a biggie. in 1925. Its stream of consciousness structure deeply influenced her later writers, go to the very end. However, she was given to depressive spells and battled mental illness. All her life seems to be a pain. Do you really want to write? Anyway, 1941. Fearful for her own mental state and afraid of the coming World War, she filled her pockets with rocks and drowned herself. What a bummer. Really, those are going to have to be pretty big rocks or deep pockets. But anyway, so yeah, let's go. They said, what is it? That drowning is one of the most painful ways to die. Yeah. So keep going. Flip over. And it's on the back of a front page. So now, Mrs. Dalloway. This whole thing is about, and as we're racing through a lot of these today, try to hang on to some of the different subject matters that are being touched on. And Mrs. Dalloway is all about a tea party, a party that she's going to have at her house. And she's a socialite, is prepping for the party. And so here, having said that, here we go. Oh, where am I going? I'm going to start, I'll start the first two paragraphs. For Lucy had her work cut out for her. The doors would be taken off their hinges. Rumpelmeyer's men were coming, and then, thought Clarissa Dalloway, what a morning, fresh as if issued to children on a beach. What a lark, what a plunge. For so it had always seemed to her when, with a little squeak of the hinges, which she could hear now, she had burst open the French doors and plunged at Morton into the open air. How fresh, how calm. Still than this, of course, the air was in early morning, like the flap of a wave, the kiss of a wave, chill and sharp, and yet, for a girl of 18 as she was then, solemn, feeling as she did standing there at the open window that something awful was about to happen, looking at the flowers, at the trees with the smoke winding off them, and the rooks rising, falling, standing and looking, until Peter Walsh said, musing among the vegetables, was that it? I prefer men to call flowers. Was that it? He must have said it at breakfast one morning when she had gone out onto the terrace. Peter Walsh. He would be back from India one of these days, June or July. She forgot which, for his letters were awfully dull. It was his sayings one remembered. His eyes, his pocket knife, his smile, his grumpiness, and when millions of things had utterly vanished. How strange it was, a few sayings like this about cabbages. So it's domestic. We've got that going. What else do you notice? What do you notice about the mood of this in the very beginning? What's the mood? How would you characterize it? She's happy. Is she almost too happy? She's, yes, something awful's going to happen. She's hyped up on emotion. Okay? Says she's how old? 18? Yeah.
And she doesn't want to be bored.
No, which is a theme we've been going with. No boredom. Yeah. So, everything's kind of at its extreme. So that plugs again into not necessarily an unreliable narrator, but an unreliable character. Okay? She can be somewhat unreliable. She's too up here. So that means if you've got this going on up here, what happens? You could have a crash. Okay? So it was enormously popular, by the way, this book. Why do you think it would be popular in 1925 in Britain after World War? What do you think? Give a guess. Yeah. Guesses are good. They need something lighter. They need something ordinary every day. What can they handle? They can handle emotion like this, but it's in a setting that's not scary. Okay? So, yeah. So, obviously very important and popular with women. readers. Okay.
There are still birds, there are.
Yeah, they're the good things, the beautiful things of life. Yeah, exactly. Okay, folks, let's move it on. Oh my goodness, I'm 25 minutes into it and we got miles to go before we sleep. Anyway, let's go to Agatha Christie, and I have put right behind, if you flip over, I gave you the murder of Roger Ackroyd. We've got Dorothy Sayers. I just gave you her bio. Some of these things I was having trouble accessing because I think they still must be under family copyright, because you know you can get into it, but you can't print it. They will not let you print it. So anyway, I did everything from Control P 7 times. Anyway, I saw no print on the thing. So here we go. I put these two ladies together for a reason. Dorothy Sayers does, and it's interesting because Tim and I were just watching last night, a little Hercule Poirot was narrating, you know, David Sachet.
Suchet.
So anyway, whatever it is. So he was narrating a biographical thing on PBS on her. And so have any of you seen it before? Several of you? Okay. It was really interesting. We just happened upon it. And anyway, one of the things that I noticed in this little bio on Dorothy Sayers is that she was very much overshadowed by Agatha Christie, you know. And so, you know, which is fascinating because that whole grouping of the Inklings during World War II, prior to World War II and during World War II, Tolkien and Lewis and Williams, that whole group got together weekly and met about their individual writings. They were all from Oxford. There was an all-male group, but they corresponded with her, and she was like the silent woman member of the group because they admired her writings greatly. And they would, you know, as they're trying to write their own things, they would use her writings as an example. And I think that's really interesting. So for her, that's kind of a really cool legacy. But, okay, let's go to Agatha Christie. Oh, let's see. You're about 4 lines down. Okay, this is her sister, older sister Madge. Madge told especially thrilling tales about a fictional, mentally deranged older sister. Agatha married, and this is this Archibald Christie, who, by the way, has an affair with somebody that he golfs with. And he leaves her for that woman. And, yeah, I know, sad. So, and she's devastated. And if you go later on, and it's also in this biography thing on TV. So she disappears for 11 days. She has a daughter. She goes in, and according to this thing, kisses her daughter. And of course, you know, they've got nannies, nursemaids, and she just disappears for 11 days. Well, there's a countrywide search for her. And she did get quite a bit of criticism for not notifying authorities where she was at. Because police, it was a national search to find her body. And they found her abandoned car. And so she did get a lot of criticism for that. One of the cool things, there's kind of a happy ending of this story, a few years later she becomes somewhat fascinated with the Middle East. So she goes, Middle East, and she's on, and I don't remember what country, but she's on an archaeological dig. I think it's in here. Front page. Yep. First big paragraph by itself, 1930. She meets an archaeologist. Now, I believe he's a little bit younger than she is. But anyway, because she likes to get, and he liked her because she wasn't afraid to get down in the dirt and dig around, you know. And so she would accompany him on many of his archaeological digs. Well, they're married, and oh my, they're married for more than 40 years. And very happy, to all accounts, a happy marriage. So I think that's interesting. Do notice halfway down here, all told, Christie wrote some 80 novels, 30 short story collections, 15 plays, 6 romances under another pen name. And this is so cool. She was knighted in 1971. Okay, and she dies in 76. Anyway, by the time Christie died last sentence, there were more than 400 million copies of her books had been sold in more than 100 languages.
Wow.
That's nice, very nice. Yes. So, Tim, did you get Bob's one?
I didn't, Bob found
You didn't get one?
Dug
Okay.
around, found on his own.
Let's go here. Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Okay, here, when I was in grad school, one of my professors, who Tim also had as a professor in a different program, anyway, was Risa Willis, Dr. Risa Willis at Drury University in Springfield. She is a Mark Twain scholar, and you know, a few times that we've been to his house, there's a huge museum right next to it. And so I just asked them, I said, do you know Dr. Risa Willis? Oh, yes. She's one of our scholars. She comes here every year, blah, 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 blah. And her book is right over there. So I bought the book. But anyway, she also, she had assigned Murder of Roger Ackroyd because she wrote under several different pen names. Now, if you like mysteries or romances, historical romances, sometime get on the web and just look under author pseudonyms, okay? And the website I was on, there's a chart. Now, they never tell you the actual person's name. Isn't that the bummer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because we always ask her, she would tell us. Anyway, so she said, I'm very happy the check arrives. Thank you very much. So she loved horses and she had a big stable. Check paid for the horses. Anyway, so you'll see this cross-listing, this graph of these people, and this is their pseudonym. And, you know, you go across the line. So you've got historical romances here. You've got mysteries here. You've got YA Lit here. And you just go across the line and they have different pseudonyms for all of us. It's the same author. So I think that's fascinating. That's a lot of writing. So here we go. Remember what I said about unreliable? I hope it's not too much of a spoiler, narrator. This is Dr. Shepherd at the breakfast table. Mrs. Farrars died on the night of the 16th, 17th September, a Thursday. I was sent for at 8 o'clock in the morning of Friday the 17th. There was nothing to be done. She had been dead some hours. It was just a few minutes after 9 when I reached home once more. I opened the front door with my latch key and purposely delayed a few moments in the hall, hanging up my hat and the light overcoat that I had deemed a wise precaution against the chill of an early autumn morning. To tell the truth, I was considerably upset and worried. I am not going to pretend that at that moment I foresaw the events of the next few weeks. I emphatically did not do so. But my instinct told me that there were stirring times ahead. Oh, we got that instinct, stirring times ahead again. From the dining room on my left, there came the rattle of teacups and the short, dry cough of my sister Caroline. Is that you, Jane? She asked. An unnecessary question. Stop there. You notice any foreshadowing, a little bit of premonition in this intro that I just read? If so, where? If not, that's fine.
Saw the events of the next few weeks.
The next few weeks, yeah. And notice where he says, excuse me, you know, I always tell my students this. Whenever you tell me, now Mrs. needs to tell you the truth, do you not always tell me the truth? That's what I say to them. And they look at me confused. So anyway, you know, it's a mannerism. We have it. It's a mannerism. It's a speech tick,
Yeah.
practically. But it adds to that idea of, yeah, really? Are you telling me the truth now? So that's one of them.
Especially if they say more than one.
Oh, yeah, repeating it over and over again. Stop that, you must stop that. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna leave that one there simply because I don't wanna ruin it for you. So, read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. It's good, sir.
Well, of course, everybody knows of her 15 plays, The Mousetrap, more than the other. The Mousetrap
Right.
was first performed at the West End in London in 1952 and has been performed
Continuously.
ever since.
Yes.
So there have been 25, 30,000 performances of The Mousetrap.
Yeah, I'm looking here. I was trying to pick out that's why I did the history.com, the shortest bios I could find. I mean, we can get on this and the bios go on forever, but anyway. So, yeah, Mousetrap is cool. Dorothy Sayers, real quick, and I'm not giving you anything here particularly to read, so once again, here we go with, she's the only child of the Reverend Henry Sayers of Anglo-Irish descent. She remains religious throughout her life, okay? Her faith and her church are important to her. It's important to her how she depicts herself as an author in her writings, okay? And I think that's interesting in and of itself. Oh, what do I want to add here? Go down to the very bottom of that page. Her theology was traditionally Anglican with emphasis on doctrine. Every available moment of her time was spent writing to the small hours of the morning. Letters, articles, and essays streamed from her pen. The war led her to write, begin here, followed by the mind of the maker, in which she compares the human with the divine creator. Blah, 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 blah. Next page. Last paragraph. Next slide. She found her culminating role after the water. And I think this is fascinating. So, you know, we've laughed. It's a thing in English. You laugh about it. But it's very true in the discipline of English. You know, you've got various camps like you do with anything, any job you have. People think this, this, and this, this. But I've often been made aware that other English people, teachers, laugh at me because I love mysteries. I absolutely love them. And I was sharing with somebody at lunch that when we go to a movie, if it's a mystery thing, you cannot imagine how disappointed I am with 15, 20 minutes into it, and I figured it out.
Oh, my.
That is the most disappointing thing. It's just like, can you not do better? I paid you $8. Really? So, anyway, and you know, it's all about the mind game. It's a puzzle, and you're just doing it in your mind. So I actually think it's a very healthy exercise for people to keep their minds sharp, is, you know, to read mysteries and go through that.
My neighbors gave me a Dorothy Sayers novel just recently. It was based in an advertising company. She'd done an incredible amount of research about how advertising.
Yeah. In fact, we flip back to this page.
I didn't see it listed in here.
I'm looking for it. Where did I say that?
Murder must be done.
Yeah. I'm not finding it. Not that particular one, but I do. Here we go. Here we go. Go back up to your first paragraph at the very end of the bio. And the advertising and how you bring in actual events and jobs and things you've done in your life. And the last couple of lines. She worked for Oxford Publishers, worked with her Oxford friend, Eric, whatever his name is, and from 1922 until 1929 served as copywriter at the London advertising firm of Benson's. So, you know, it all meshes. Yeah, good. And that's probably why it's so not just well written, but meticulous in its writing, you know, because she's a copy editor. Last thing here, we'll move on. Toward the end of her life, last bigger paragraph for the essence. She found her culminating role after the war. Dante's writings had long intrigued her. Now she taught herself Old Italian and made a translation in terzarima of the Divine Comedy unmatched for its popularity and the clarity of its notes. She also found time to finish her translation of the Song of Roland from the Old French, but she unexpectedly died from heart failure, blah, 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 and a friend finishes it for her. Folks, so she's not just a popular writer that's meticulous in her writing style and her prose. She's also a scholar. And you know that she has both of those dimensions to her life, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, keep flipping. Sound and the Fury.
But
Here we
one
go.
pays and one doesn't.
What?
One pays and one doesn't.
Yeah.
There's no
That's
money.
true.
There's no money in academic writing.
That's true. Yeah, that's a great observation, yes. You know, you can pat yourself on the shoulder and, you know, and have beans for supper. But anyway, academic life sometimes is like that. Yeah. So, okay, here we go. Sound and the Fury. What did I just skip? Well, yeah, he's born. That'd be good. Okay, here we go. Oxford, Mississippi. How many have been to Oxford? I've always wanted to go. I've not gone. Sometime Tim and I are going to make that trip.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Together.
Okay. Always want to go.
What's the school?
So, Ole Miss. Yeah. Literary woman who encouraged Faulkner and his three brothers to read. Their mother, okay. He was a good student, but he lost interest. That happens, yeah, high school, you know. He joined, third one down, the British Royal Flying Corps. And his first novel is Soldier's Pay. After that, if you'll flip the page. 1929, which is when this is published. He finally marries Estelle, his high school, which we talked about earlier, high school sweetheart. She divorced her first husband, and she had 2 children. They live in a ruined mansion that I can't wait to go to. Anyway, and start trying to restore it, and I think it's a money pit, is what I've read. And, let's see. The book opens with the interior monologue of a developmentally disabled mute character. Yeah. Are you ready? His next book, As I Lay Dying, so you've got all these different characters telling the story from their viewpoint, had 59 different interior monologues.
Oh,
That would be hard to keep up with. You know, who's talking now? So, anyway, go on down. He supplements his income with writing short stories and sending off to magazines, because that was pretty lucrative at the time. Most of us are old enough to remember when they published in women's magazines. Do you remember them publishing stories? Yeah. They no longer do that. Yeah, even Saturday, it's sad. Anyway. And so he goes to Hollywood to become a screenwriter. There you go. And again, he does the 2 movies. He wins the Nobel Prize for Literature, and then he wins the National Book Award, and evidently dying of a heart attack at age 65 is the popular thing in this little packet. Do you remember Fred Sanford? Sanford and Sons?
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, so he was such a fake. So he was funny though. So, Sound and the Fury. Through the fence, between the curling flower spaces, I could see them hitting. They were coming toward where the flag was, and I went along the fence. Luster was hunting in the grass by the flower tree. They took the flag out and they were hitting. Then they put the flag back, they went to the table, and he hit, and the other hit. Then they went on, and I went along the fence. Luster came away from the flower tree, and we went along the fence, and they stopped, and we stopped, and I looked through the fence while Luster was hunting in the grass. Here, Caddy, he hit. They went away across the pasture. I held to the fence and watched them going away. Listen at you now, Luster said. Ain't you something, 33 years old, going on that way? after I done went all the way to town to buy you that cake. Hush up that moaning. Ain't you going to help me find the porters so I can go to the show tonight? They were hitting little across the pasture. I went back along the fence to where the flag was. It flapped on the bright grass and the trees. Do y'all remember the movie? And I should have looked it up. I don't remember the year. With Yul Brynner,
Yeah.
that I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes, I don't remember the girl that played, I don't remember the actress. Was that Joanne Woodward?
What movie?
So the movie of Sound and the Fury, it was Yul Brynner, and I think the girl was Joanne Woodward. Are you gonna look it up?
I'll look it up.
Okay. And I remember I loved the movie. I was a kid watching it, I loved it. So anyway, I had not read any of the novel. It was years and years later, probably more than 20. And but I thought that novel, or that movie, at least in the intro, depicted it pretty well, as far as trying to grasp the characters. What have you got?
I don't yet.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
There is a, I think of Sound and the Fury, because you have so many different narrators and it moves so much from one to the other, it becomes very confusing to read. And I think of Sound and the Fury that when he was getting this published, he asked the publisher, he said, can we print the different narrators' text in different colored ink? Like 5, 6 different colors, kind of like Jesus' words are in red kind of thing. So that the reader will be able to keep track a little better of my stream of consciousness, narration stuff. And of course, the publisher said, well, no, we can't, because that's too expensive. So it could have been a less confusing novel if it had been color-coded, but it just didn't work out that way. So even he was aware of how confusing this could be to read as the narrator shifts from one person to the other.
Well, it's interesting because, my goodness, we don't assign this type of novel at all unless they're seniors, English students.
And yes, it is a 1959 version of this novel. Yul Brynner and played Jason Compson, and then Joanna Woodward played Quentin
I
Compson.
thought it was Joanne Woodward, yeah. So, yeah, when I was looking some of this stuff up, this is very funny to me. And those of us, yeah, I'm out of the classroom, I got it. Anyway, but that are still in the classroom and you do things, on the web, looking things up. I tell you, Sound of the Fury by William Faulkner. Hit. What do I come up with? A whole page of schmoop. Now, schmoop, for those of you that don't know, it is an academic help for students. And that's why I said we would never assign something like this except for a senior, because it is somewhat confusing. But they literally, it's like grade saver. It's like, I'm trying to think what else. Cliff Notes, thank you. Spark Notes, Cliff Notes, grade saver. And it's kind of one of the things that makes me sad, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That unless you're a motivated reader and you're really interested in actually reading a novel, sometimes, most often, what we end up with is people just going for the outline version, give me the plot line thing. And so they don't get the richness of the prose and all those little subtleties, that if you pay attention in one paragraph, just one paragraph, that add to the enjoyment and the complexity of whatever that author is wanting, or the story they're telling, or the message they're trying to convey. And I think for me, and I'm in students, okay, for me that is one of the down things of the web. There, I said it. I love the web. I use it all the time. But it just stop. I don't think that's really healthy education. That's there. I'm done. I'm editorialized. I'm done. Moving on. Okay. Dashiell Hammett. hard to remember. We also read a novel this spring, Maltese Falcon. And that's not the excerpt I gave you here because I was trying to get things just from the 20s. And Dashiell Hammett's an interesting character. If you look here, he leaves school early. He ends up at the Pinkerton's Detective Agency. Go figure. Which you see what he's learned over and over in his novels. And anybody a fan of Raymond Chandler? No? Yes? Dashiell Hammett? Okay. Anyway, turn the page. What I gave you was from Red Harvest, is what he publishes in that decade. And he's had his films made, his novels made in films. And what else? He also, remember The Thin Man? Next paragraph?
Yes.
Nick and Nora Charles. And he actually was infatuated and fell in love with a woman that he based Nora Charles on in The Thin Man, descriptive and, personality traits. So, I like him. He's the one that I was talking about, kind of tongue-in-cheek, macho man. And I don't mean in the strength necessarily category, but there's several articles written about this, by the way, scholarly articles. And talking as he is described, especially in Maltese Falcon, he's always described as having satanic features. He's a blonde Satan. Wait a minute, a blonde Satan. That messes with my mind. And so, and his face is always shaded, that kind of thing. It's very campy. It's meant to be campy. Okay, because we're still talking about escapist kind of literature. It has action. It moves very quickly. However, it's not so real as to be uncomfortable. That's important for escapist literature. It does have some themes in it that, remember I told you the thing about the woman turns out to be the villain. That's not in every single one of his, but it's in many of his. And the guy who starts out trying to be, the man's man, ends up being somewhat fooled by the beauty of this woman. And so women here, again, it follows in the tradition of not to be trusted. That's a feature of this kind of literature. He has, in all of these, he has a Girl Friday. There's always a good girl. Bad girl, good girl. And the good girl is, faithful, and she's someone who helps him in all of these stories, but sees him for what he is. And he always tries to put his best foot forward for her. And then sometimes toward the end of these novels, he will realize that she's seen him too keenly. She just has a little bit too much insight into how he really is deep down. And so he'll be embarrassed and kind of backs away. I think that's that's pretty much through all of his work. So insights of a different kind is what I'm trying to say. So let's look here. I think this, and then the rest of these are just things I'm gonna mention real quick and we're done. This is from The Woman, it's first chapter. Woman in Green and a Man in Gray. And I'm skipping down on this one, so go your 1, 2, 3, they're little paragraphs, 1, 2, 3, 4. Fifth paragraph, I'm gonna do the 5th and 6th where it says the city wasn't pretty. All right, and he's very much, if you've got a woman villain, he's on this kind of dystopian trend, the naturalism, where things are kind of like this. He likes to pride himself on writing characters that see things as they really are. Once again, that's a lens, that's a viewpoint. So, the city wasn't pretty. Most of its builders had gone in for gaudiness. Maybe they had been successful at first. Since then, the smelters, whose brick stacks stuck up tall against a gloomy mountain to the south, had yellow smoked everything into uniform dinginess. The result was an ugly city of 40,000 people set in an ugly notch between two ugly mountains that had been all dirtied up by mining. Spread over this was a grimy sky that looked as if it had come out of the smelter stacks. The first policeman I saw needed a shave. The second had a couple of buttons off his shabby uniform. The third stood in the center of the city's main intersection, Broadway and Union Street, directing traffic with a cigar in one corner of his mouth. After that, I stopped checking them up. Do you notice anything, particularly on this first paragraph, as connected back when we were talking about the 1914 through 1917 and Upton Sinclair? Did you notice any similarity? Muckrakers, slaughterhouses, you have the same kind of tone of dirty, dirty, dirty. You know, things. He likes to set that tone. And so, although he's, whatever this was, 29, he's more than probably a dozen more years later in publishing. Remember what I said the other day about there's no clearly defined boundaries on this stuff. It depending upon what someone likes and the way they want to write, it merges, it bleeds over into somebody else's. They may admire that, and they may decide, okay, I want to kind of use that idea within my own writing. Anybody read any of his stuff? No? I recommend Maltese Falcon. I took this one, like I said, just because it was in that time frame, but Maltese Falcon is really good. And I laughed, you know, I've read it several times. I laughed every time I read it. It's just so ridiculous in a lot of ways. It's just like, are you stupid? So what?
Well, in some respects, the way he writes is stylistically the way that Agatha Christie writes, which is very simply, a lot of simple sentences, limited vocabulary.
To appeal to a mass
To appeal to a
audience.
mass audience. You can be college educated and read it. You can hardly got out of high school and you can read it.
Right.
You can be working day stiff and come home and want to read something. You can read Dashiell Hammett. It's really designed for a lot of different kinds of readers.
At a time when people are reading a lot.
Yes, sure.
Every segment
sure.
of the society
Sure.
is reading a
Exactly,
lot.
yeah.
Did somebody want to say something over here? I heard, no? Okay. Okay, let's visit real quickly in 3 minutes. Willa Cather. And I didn't give you anything else on this, but Willa Cather, during this time frame, has Death Comes for the Archbishop. Yeah? Did you read it sometime in your life? Yes. Okay, New Mexico. Yes, my favorite. Anyway, New Mexico, and yes, it is Catholic Church. And yeah, if we turn over here and look at this last paragraph, just real quickly, her 1927 novel Death Comes for the Archbishop, the story of two French-Canadian priests who built a cathedral in the wilds of New Mexico, was also well received. Anyway, and she lives most of her adult life in New York. What's fascinating that they don't tell you in here is in the 1920s and the early 1930s, there's a huge resurgence. It's across literature of interest in Native American stories, okay, and the Southwest. And it's a 5-6 year. Bob,
Did they tell where she was buried?
where is she buried, Tim? She's buried back up. Go.
She's buried in New England and New Hampshire, in
Mhm.
the southeast corner of the old cemetery.
Okay, because when we went to a conference that was in that area, one of the day trips, and we had to leave to get back to work, was to go to her grave site. So we totally missed it.
Smith College. We were at Smith College for the conference.
Yeah.
Nature.
We were up at Smith College, it was pretty cool. Let's go, poor Ernest. I left Ernest out.
Ernest.
Oh, I'm sure he'll never forgive me. But anyway, on your bio, here goes. How many know very much about Ernest Hemingway? There you go. Fascinating man.
Yep.
Do you remember, did I mention this the first day? No, he did not kill himself with his father's gun.
Good.
That's a misnomer, that's untrue. He does kill himself. His father killed himself, but not with the same gun. Anyway, so here we go. 3 lines down. Influential American literary icon, straightforward prose and use of understatement. He tackled topics such as bullfighting and war in his work, and he became famous for his own macho, hard-drinking persona. One of the things about Ernest Hemingway that I think is fascinating was one of his goals to learn to write women well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he learned to write women well. He struggled with writing women well. There's a short story that he wrote that, and it's super famous. You know, freshmen read it all the time. Anyway, and they talk all around the subjects. It's almost all dialogue. Okay, all dialogue, and it is very short. And it's about, they never say it's a man and a woman, okay? And they're at a train station, and there's a lot of tension between them, incredible amount of tension. And she says things like, we could have the whole world. And he said, no, we can't. Our world will be over. It's about, and they never mention it, she's pregnant. He wants her to have an abortion. And he keeps saying, it will be fine. I know lots of people that's had this. Really? Anyway, and so this is in the 1930s. And so, anyway, it ends up at the end of the story that she says, because she's going to do anything, she's much younger, she's going to do anything to please him. And she doesn't want to have an abortion, but you get the feel that she's going to go ahead and have an abortion for him, because she thinks she's going to, but she's one in a string of women, okay? He's up her. And so he does her dialogue pretty well. And so that was one of his goals, to learn how to do that. Oh my goodness, let's go to page 3 of this. We're almost to the end here, and I won't, because we're already, oh man. Big paragraph. Hemingway had become a cult figure whose 4 marriages and adventures, and he loved calico cats, by the way. I think he had 17 in his home in Florida. And calico cats, you remember, can't reproduce. It's a genetic defect. We have calico cats. They can't reproduce. Adventurous exploits in big game hunting and fishing were widely covered in the press, but despite his fame, he had not produced a major literary work in the decade before The Old Man and the Sea. What it doesn't say here, and I meant to look this up, I believe he and Marilyn Monroe killed themselves within just a few months of each other, and they were working on the same movie set.
Oh.
Yes. So, anyway, let's look at, real quick,
Just a question, do you know where he's buried?
Probably Key West.
He's buried in Spain.
Oh, my.
really?
He's
Oh,
buried
my.
in Spain, where the picadors jump behind the barrier, and where the bulls come in. That's where he's going to be buried.
He would be happy there, I'm
So
sure.
He was taken there and buried, and there's no marking inside the bull arena, but there is a plaque outside. This
Interesting.
says Ernest Hemingway is buried inside.
Oh,
That was at his request.
That's cool. That's cool. Okay, I'm going, because we're past time, and you've stayed with me. So here we go. I'm going to mention this. I've left out and given the short shrift to probably the most important of all of these. So here we go with our German. Okay. Remark. And anyway, here he is. Native German. He writes all about, he was in the war, he was a soldier, German side, all quiet on the Western Front. It becomes banned, it gets published, immensely popular. Hitler, of course, bans it. And then, anyway, it is supposed to be stark detail, physical trauma of the war. And someone, is it? You've read all of it. And then after the book in the 1930 film version, was banned by the Nazis in their rise to power in 1933. He writes 9 more novels, and every single one is about this questioning thing about the horror and the futility of war. A couple of people had asked me for lists, and man, you can get lists on World War I, of books to read, just over and over. I gave you a shorter version. So this was on the Barnes & Noble website. 10 astounding books about World War I. And yeah, they're all pretty much listed there for you. And so if you want to, and by the way, if you got on this website and you clicked here on the individual ones, they probably would give you either more of a synopsis or take you to where you could read them either online or purchase them. Folks, I've taken you 6 minutes after Sir.
Oh, you were talking about the Hemingway gun question. The story always was that when Hemingway turned 21, his mother, with whom he did not get along, he despised his mother, sent him for his birthday, sent him a cake, and in the same box included the gun that his father had killed himself with, which he then promptly threw into, he said, a local lake. So anyway, but yeah, he shot himself with a shotgun.
So, I commend you all for sticking this out this week. Thank you for your attendance. You have more energy than I have. So, God bless you all. You have a wonderful rest of the summer. And stay healthy. I hope to see you next year.
I wanted to ask one question. What about Angela Lansbury and those mysteries on TV?
What about them?
Well, do you like them?
Oh,
The element of surprise, like toward the end.
I like anything that's a twisted ending.
That's
Yeah.
what?
That has an ending that's a twist.